Johnny Carson wasn't just a TV host, he was late night. For 3 decades, he owned the screen with effortless charm, the kind of calm confidence that made millions feel like they knew him personally. When his final show aired in 1992, over 50 million people watched him say goodbye. It felt like the end of an era. But no one expected what came next. Because after that night, Johnny didn't go on a farewell tour. He didn't write a memoir. He didn't even sit down for a single major interview. Instead, he vanished. No comebacks, no curtain call, just silence. One of the most recognizable faces in America suddenly retreated from the world so completely that, in his final years, he saw fewer than 20 people a year outside his home. Friends, co-workers, even neighbors barely heard from him. It was as if the most famous man in Hollywood simply evaporated. Why? Why would a man adored by millions choose to spend his final decade in near total isolation? Why would the king of conversation stop speaking to almost everyone? Some say Johnny was simply tired of fame. Others claim he was hiding from a painful past that still haunted him. And a few insist that his final retreat was triggered by devastating loss. A heartbreak so deep, it pushed him into silence. Whatever the truth is, it wasn't random. Johnny didn't disappear by accident. He built that isolation, brick by brick, long before he ever left the stage. Because the Johnny Carson the world knew may have never existed at all. Behind the cameras, behind the smiles, was a man fighting demons most people never saw. A lifetime of emotional wounds, broken relationships, addiction, and grief so heavy, it nearly crushed him. And once the lights went off, there was nothing left to hold on to. Today, we're going to peel back that mask. We'll trace Johnny's story from the childhood that shaped him, to the fame that controlled him, to the tragedies that finally shattered him. And you might be surprised by what really forced him into the shadows, because sometimes the most loved people feel the most alone. For most of America, Johnny Carson seemed like the kind of man everyone wanted to grab a drink with, relaxed, witty, and effortlessly charming. He made conversation look easy, like he had spent his entire life floating from one social circle to another without a single awkward moment. Night after night, Johnny sat behind that iconic desk, laughing with celebrities, teasing musicians, and putting nervous guests at ease with a single glance. To viewers, he was an extrovert with a golden tongue, someone who could make anyone feel comfortable. But that version of Johnny wasn't the full story. Behind the scenes, people closest to him noticed something strange. The second the cameras clicked off, it was like someone flipped a switch. The smooth-talking superstar would go quiet, sometimes instantly. His producer, Peter Lassily, once said Johnny seemed to put on a mask when the red light came on. The energy, the charm, the warmth, it was all there by design. But when the show ended, he'd slip out of that personality like someone taking off a costume. He didn't want to linger backstage, chat with crew members, or mingle with guests. Most nights, he left the studio so fast it stunned people who tried to catch him for a friendly word. The small talk, the jokes, all of it felt like unnecessary effort to him. Even his co-workers, who saw him every day for years, admitted they barely knew him. He treated chit-chat like a chore, something to escape rather than enjoy. At Johnny's request, NBC built him a private exit so he didn't have to pass through hallways crowded with staff or fans. That one doorway became his lifeline. The routine never changed. Finish the monologue, shake a few hands on camera, then disappear into the night before anyone could stop him. The same man who interviewed thousands of celebrities didn't actually want to talk to people once the audience stopped watching. Even big industry events, Hollywood's social heartbeat, were something Johnny avoided. Invitations poured in constantly, but he treated them like unwanted chores. While other late-night personalities attended dozens of events each year, Johnny might show up to only a handful. And even then, reluctantly. He blamed it on being an introvert, joking that he'd rather spend time with his dog than make small talk with strangers. And he meant it. Home was his sanctuary. After taping, he slipped into quiet rituals that helped him recharge. Playing tennis alone, reading astronomy magazines, scribbling notes, working crossword puzzles. When he did speak to people, it was brief and controlled. He'd call Jay Leno to swap jokes, then hang up. No deep conversation, no drawn-out bonding, just business and silence. Visitors who saw him at home described a man who seemed content in stillness. Director Howard Smith recalled sitting with Johnny, barely speaking, simply looking at the stars. It wasn't awkward. Johnny liked it that way, controlled, quiet, safe. But here's the strange part. Johnny wasn't unhappy because he lacked friends. He chose distance. He needed to be alone. To him, solitude wasn't punishment. It was comfort. It was where he felt like himself. That charming extrovert America adored was real, but only for a few hours a day. The rest of the time he retreated into silence. Why? What made him so determined to avoid people, even those who cared about him? That answer goes much deeper than fame or personality. It goes all the way back to the childhood he rarely spoke about. And once you learn what shaped him, his isolation starts to make sense. Because Johnny didn't hide from people out of arrogance. He hid because the world once made him feel unsafe. And that story begins when he was just a boy. Long before the spotlights and applause, Johnny Carson lived a childhood defined by silence, fear, and perfection. And that shaped everything he became. Growing up in Iowa, Johnny wasn't the carefree kid running through cornfields or playing ball with neighbors. While other children laughed and chased each other outside, Johnny stayed indoors, alone. He spent afternoons with comic books and a magic kit he begged his parents for, practicing card tricks instead of friendships. Not because he didn't want friends, but because the world outside felt threatening. By the time he was 14, simple social interactions caused him intense anxiety. When guests came to visit, Johnny would quietly disappear, crouching behind his family's upright piano or slipping into dark corners, shuffling a deck of cards just to soothe himself. Anything to avoid being noticed, anything to avoid risking disappointment. Because in the Carson household, affection wasn't freely given, it had to be earned. Johnny's mother, Ruth, ruled the family with a cold and rigid sense of control. Perfection was the standard, and anything less brought scorn. She wasn't the doting, encouraging figure you might imagine behind a young prodigy. Instead, she criticized, lectured, and rarely praised. Some said she didn't see her children as kids, but as soldiers that needed constant discipline. She especially singled out Johnny. She reportedly believed he would always be filthy, as if even as a child he wasn't worthy of her approval. Imagine growing up with the unshakable sense that your own mother looks at you and sees disappointment. That kind of message stays with you. It burrows deep. So Johnny learned early that vulnerability was dangerous, that being seen was risky. He internalized the idea that love could be taken away at any moment, that if he wasn't perfect, he wasn't enough. Still, the boy wanted connection. He wanted warmth, but he didn't get it from his mother. He got it from strangers. Magic became his escape. When Johnny finally built up the courage to perform tricks for others, he felt something unfamiliar: acceptance. The applause from audiences gave him a feeling he never received at home. He wasn't being judged, he was being celebrated. For once, he felt visible, without feeling wrong. His mother did support his early magic performances in a practical sense. She even made him a cape, but emotionally, she remained distant. Any encouragement he received was cold, transactional. Perform, be perfect. Earn it. Years later, when she passed away at age 84, Johnny felt no sentimental pull, no longing, no grief. He famously told friends, "The Wicked Witch is dead." He refused to attend her funeral, but what happened after that changed him forever. Inside her home, among her belongings, Johnny found a box, a large one. Inside, he discovered carefully saved newspaper clippings. Every article, review, and mention from his entire career. The mother who never praised him had secretly tracked his every success. She had quietly loved him in the only way she could, by watching. Johnny took that box and kept it in his closet for the rest of his life. Did he regret not going to the funeral? Did he suddenly realize that beneath all the ice, she cared? Or did it confuse him even more, proving that the affection he craved was always there but never shared? We'll never know. But what's clear is this: that childhood, the emotional distance, the pressure to perform, the confusion around love, became the blueprint for his adult life. It taught Johnny that people couldn't be trusted, that real intimacy was dangerous, and that validation came from applause, not relationships. So as he grew older, Johnny didn't learn how to connect, he learned how to entertain. He didn't learn to express emotions, he learned to hide them. The applause validated him. The audience loved him. But when the cameras stopped, that comfort disappeared, leaving only the frightened boy from Iowa who never felt good enough. Johnny Carson didn't just stumble into show business. He ran toward it like it was the only place where life finally made sense. Because for him, performing wasn't about fame or money. It was about safety. It was the one place where he could control how people saw him, and where connection came without real vulnerability. After years spent hiding from guests in his childhood home, Johnny discovered something unexpected. When he performed for others, they smiled, they applauded, they liked him. And unlike his mother's cold, conditional approval, this praise felt pure. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about entertaining. The spotlight became his first taste of emotional warmth, even if it came from strangers. That warmth rewired him. At 14, he performed magic tricks across town, doing small shows for $3 a night. It was the first time he realized there was a world outside his living room where he didn't need to be afraid. As the great Carsoni, he found his voice, even if it was just a stage voice. On stage, he didn't have to be the anxious kid hiding behind furniture. He could be anyone he wanted. But as he got older, his life took an unexpected detour. He joined the U.S. Navy. While many remember Johnny as soft-spoken and gentle, he was surprisingly skilled in physical combat. He boxed. He won 15 out of 16 matches. This side of him, disciplined, competitive, quietly fierce, shocked people who assumed he was fragile. Even more surprising, he caught the attention of U.S. Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal. Forrestal asked Johnny if he wanted to stay in the Navy long-term. Carson said no. He wanted to perform. That must have sounded wild, turning down the Secretary of the Navy to chase magic tricks. But Forrestal didn't scoff. He asked Johnny to prove himself, right there. Johnny performed a magic trick, and he nailed it. He entertained one of the most powerful men in the country, and Forrestal was stunned. From that moment, Johnny knew. If he could charm someone like that, he could charm anyone. The stage wasn't just calling, it had chosen him. And yet, deep down, his goal wasn't to socialize. He wasn't trying to connect with people off stage. To him, performance was a shield, a way to be surrounded by people without really being with them. After the Navy, Johnny pursued journalism at the University of Nebraska. At first, he thought he'd write comedy, keep his distance, stay behind the scenes. Writing was safe. It required no eye contact and no vulnerability. But something shifted. Johnny switched majors to speech and drama. He no longer wanted to feed jokes to other people. He wanted to deliver them himself. The applause was intoxicating, and radio felt like the perfect compromise. He could perform without facing crowds. People could hear him but not see him. It was human contact, without the terrifying closeness. By 1949, he graduated, and the path ahead wasn't straightforward. He failed plenty. He tried different gigs, but he never stopped chasing the stage. Every setback led to another chance, and every chance led to more public validation. Eventually, in 1962, The Tonight Show fell into his hands, and suddenly, the shy kid from Iowa was center stage every night on national television. To outsiders, it made no sense. How could a shy introvert become the face of American comedy? But for Johnny, it made perfect sense. The Tonight Show was his controlled universe. The jokes were rehearsed. The conversations were predictable. The audience was friendly. Nothing could surprise him. It was therapy disguised as entertainment, because on stage he could control the narrative. In real life, he'd always been at the mercy of others. A mother who withheld love, a world that felt unsafe. But under studio lights, he was finally in command. Here's the paradox. Being a late-night host let Johnny be surrounded by people without ever actually letting them in. He could sit feet away from Hollywood's biggest stars and reveal nothing about himself. He could make millions feel close to him without being close to anyone. That distance wasn't accidental, it was survival. But as his fame exploded, something else happened. The more beloved he became, the more suffocated he felt. The outside world, the crowds, the noise, the attention, became a threat. The Tonight Show wasn't a comfort anymore. It became pressure. It became exposure. So even at his peak, Johnny was planning his escape. He wanted to leave the spotlight. He wanted to live quietly. He wanted to go back to the one place he ever felt safe: solitude. And that desire would only grow stronger as his personal relationships began to fall apart. Johnny Carson could make millions of strangers laugh every night. But at home, he struggled to hold a single relationship together. Behind the charm and the cool confidence, Johnny carried the same emotional distance he learned in childhood. He didn't know how to be fully present with the people closest to him, and the pattern followed him through every major relationship in his life. The result was a trail of broken marriages, estranged children, and quiet guilt he never escaped. His first marriage to college sweetheart Jody Wolcott began in 1949. They were young, hopeful, and completely unprepared for the storm that fame would bring. As Johnny's career took off, the cracks showed fast. He became obsessed with his work. Long hours, constant stress, and little time for anything else. Then came the affairs. Johnny later admitted he cheated on Jody, and when the marriage collapsed after 14 years, it didn't just destroy their relationship, it fractured his bond with their 3 sons, Christopher, Rick, and Corey. Johnny didn't fight to stay close to his kids. He kept working. He kept performing. And the emotional distance that defined his childhood repeated itself, this time with his own children. Just like his mother, he became cold, distant, absent. After the divorce, Johnny didn't take time to reflect or grow. He remarried almost immediately. His second wife, Joanne Copeland, was a beautiful model who hoped Johnny's success meant stability. Instead, she ran into the same invisible wall Jody had hit. Johnny simply wasn't there. He was physically present, but emotionally unreachable. Work came first, and everything else, including her, existed in the background. Their marriage lasted 9 years, but by the end, Joanne accused him of emotional neglect. The divorce was painful, but nothing compared to what came next. Johnny's third marriage to Joanna Holland became the most expensive and emotionally draining of them all. Joanna was a glamorous socialite, someone who loved events, people, and noise, the exact opposite of the man she married. While she sparkled in public, Johnny craved silence. Their worlds clashed so violently that the relationship felt like a slow-motion car crash, and when it finally fell apart, it nearly destroyed him. The divorce turned into a brutal, public battle over money. Joanna walked away with over $20 million, one of the most staggering settlements in Hollywood at the time. The emotional toll was even heavier. By 1985, Johnny had spent nearly his entire adult life trying and failing to build a family. 3 marriages gone, 3 sons drifting away, and every time he tried again, the pattern repeated. So when he married for the 4th time, to Alexis Mass in 1987, he did something different. He didn't try to change. He simply found someone who didn't challenge his solitude. Alexis was private, calm, discreet. 26 years younger, she didn't push him to be social, didn't drag him to parties, didn't ask him to open up emotionally. To the outside world, she seemed almost invisible. But that's exactly what Johnny needed. Someone who would let him disappear. And he did. Even in this marriage, Johnny kept his distance. He spent hours alone reading, playing tennis, staring at the ocean. They ate in silence. No large dinner gatherings, no buzzing household full of guests, just quiet. Some say Alexis accepted his emotional walls. Others believe she simply learned to live around them. Maybe both are true. But Johnny's emotional distance didn't stop with wives. It defined his relationship with his sons too. He provided for them financially, but emotionally, he was barely there. He rarely expressed affection, rarely initiated contact, rarely showed the warmth he so easily displayed on TV. His sons grew up watching their father charm the world, but struggled to connect with them privately. One of the boys once admitted their relationship felt like being a stranger to someone everyone else adored. It's heartbreaking, but not surprising. The same emotional coldness his mother showed him, he showed to his children. The cycle continued, and in the end, that distance cost him more than money. It cost him time. Time he would never get back. Time he desperately wanted when tragedy struck years later. Because his isolation didn't just come from his childhood or his personality, it also came from loss. Devastating loss that reshaped his life forever. And after that moment, there was no coming back. For decades, Johnny Carson looked untouchable. He was sharp, quick-witted, and effortlessly cool, even when he casually lit a cigarette on live television. Back then, smoking wasn't just normal. It was part of the image. It made him seem relaxed, rebellious, and charming. Viewers loved it. Advertisers loved it. Johnny played the part perfectly, but behind the scenes, that habit was quietly destroying him. Johnny wasn't just a casual smoker. He was a full-blown chain smoker, burning through 40 to 60 cigarettes a day, 3 packs, every day. Sometimes more during stressful tapings, during monologues, during commercial breaks, behind the curtain. He always had one burning. It was constant. It was compulsive. And it was killing him. He didn't deny his addiction privately. He knew it was bad. He just couldn't stop. Doctors warned him early. The cough wasn't normal. His chest hurt. His breathing was strained. Friends begged him to quit. Still, the cigarettes stayed. Some said the smoke was a comfort, a distraction from anxiety. Others believed it was a way to dull the emotional pain he never processed. Maybe it was both. What we do know is this. By the late 1970s, Johnny admitted privately that cigarettes were destroying him. He even said he should have gotten help, but he didn't. And once the damage was done, there was no going back. The diagnosis he couldn't escape. In 1991, doctors finally confirmed what he tried to ignore. Johnny had emphysema, a disease that slowly destroys the lungs, making it harder and harder to breathe. Some people wondered, was this why he retired from The Tonight Show in 1992? Publicly, his retirement seemed shocking. He was at the top of his game, sharper than ever. Fans begged him to stay. But behind the scenes, his body was failing. Crowded rooms made him gasp for air. Stairs exhausted him. Even walking short distances left him breathless. Johnny hated the idea of being seen struggling. He hated looking weak. The thought of gasping for air on television terrified him more than the disease itself. So he left before anyone could watch him fall apart. He walked away while he still looked strong. A slow decline. By 1993, things grew worse. Walking 100 yards, the length of a football field, was enough to make him stop and catch his breath. His lung capacity kept shrinking, dropping to an estimated 35 to 40% by 2004. Most people at that level require oxygen just to sit up. Johnny reportedly refused to use supplemental oxygen for as long as he could. Some say he kept smoking well after his diagnosis. That part remains debated. But the addiction had its claws deep. Even with emphysema ripping his lungs apart, he pushed through life quietly, privately. Between 1999 and 2002, he was hospitalized for heart issues and pneumonia, both complications of his smoking-damaged lungs. His body couldn't fight anymore. By 2004, things were dire. He needed oxygen 24/7, tubes in his nose, machines by his side. His world shrank. from Hollywood sound stages and millions of fans to a quiet living room and a breath-by-breath struggle. This wasn't just illness, it was punishment delivered slowly, one breath at a time. In his final months, he knew the clock was ticking. He once privately admitted he was on borrowed time. Still, he kept his condition hidden from the world, just as he hid his emotions. And on January 23, 2005, Johnny Carson died from respiratory failure caused by emphysema. No final TV special, no public statement, no Hollywood farewell, just silence. But here's the haunting part. Some people close to him believed Johnny didn't want to fight, that somewhere along the way he had stopped choosing to live. Because smoking wasn't just a habit, it was an escape. As tragedies compounded, family loss, failed marriages, emotional solitude, cigarettes became a quiet way to fade. They dulled the pain until his body couldn't take it anymore. Whether he understood it or not, he was slowly disappearing long before he died. And when death finally came, it wasn't the disease alone that took him. It was everything he'd carried with him, the fear, the loneliness, the regret. But perhaps nothing hit him harder than the loss that struck years before his death, a tragedy that shattered what was left of his heart and tightened his retreat from the world forever. If Johnny's childhood shaped his emotional distance, and fame magnified it, then tragedy is what finally broke him. Because for all the ways Johnny kept people at arm's length, there were still a few connections he wished he'd handled differently, especially with his sons. But life didn't give him the chance to fix those relationships. Instead, it delivered blow after blow, each one pushing him deeper into isolation, until all that was left was silence. After his third divorce, Johnny was already exhausted, emotionally and financially. He'd spent decades trying to balance work with family and failed every time. His sons grew up mostly in his shadow, watching from a distance as their father became a national treasure while barely being present in their lives. Yet no matter how emotionally detached he seemed, he still cared about them. And that's what made what happened next so devastating. The day everything changed, on June 21, 1991, tragedy struck. Johnny's middle son, Rick Carson, died in a car accident on a narrow road in California. Some reports suggested his car may have slipped off a cliff. Others say the circumstances were uncertain. Whatever the truth, the result was the same. Rick was gone instantly. The news shattered Johnny. For weeks, he was inconsolable. He carried a guilt so heavy that it never left him. After all, he had spent years keeping his distance, years he could never get back. Friends later said Johnny never recovered from Rick's death. It was the wound that changed everything. Some believe Rick's passing was the real reason Johnny began retreating from the spotlight. Not fame, not exhaustion, but grief. Losing a child is unnatural. It reverses the order of life. And for someone like Johnny, who already struggled with emotional expression, the pain didn't just hurt, it hollowed him out. The second blow. Just as Johnny was trying to live with that loss, tragedy struck again. In 1995, his eldest son, Christopher, died at the age of 45 from lung cancer. Like his father, he was a heavy smoker. The irony was cruel. Johnny's own lifelong addiction had modeled the very habit that ultimately took his son. This time, the guilt was unbearable. How do you cope with knowing your influence may have played a part in your child's death? How do you face your own reflection after that? The truth is, Johnny never did. He grew further apart from his remaining son. The two spoke rarely. Whatever chance he had to rebuild those relationships was gone. In private moments, Johnny reportedly reflected on the emptiness of everything he'd built. Fame, fortune, awards. None of it mattered if he couldn't keep the people he loved. One of his recurring questions to close friends was heartbreaking. What's the point of all this? He meant it, genuinely. He had spent a lifetime becoming the most beloved host in America, only to outlive two of his children and remain distant from the third. The spotlight had given him everything, except the ability to deeply connect. Retreating from the world, After losing Rick and Christopher, Johnny's isolation deepened. He shut doors that were barely open to begin with. Invitations were ignored. Calls went unanswered. Friendships faded. Those who visited him in Malibu later said it felt like stepping into a world paused in time. Quiet, still, untouched. He spent afternoons reading, evenings watching the ocean, and nights lost in thought. Sometimes he'd stargaze with a friend beside him, but rarely spoke. It wasn't depression in the dramatic sense. It was resignation. The tragedies didn't make him angry. They made him quiet. Words felt useless. Company felt exhausting. The world had taken too much. Even his fourth wife, Alexis, whom he stayed with until the end, couldn't pull him back. She adapted to his silence, becoming another quiet presence in a quiet house. Johnny wasn't hiding because he hated people anymore. He was hiding because he was tired. Tired of losing, tired of pretending, tired of opening up only to have life take away what little he offered. And so, his retreat became complete. The emotional walls he built as a child became the fortress he died inside. Not out of bitterness, but because he'd finally learned that safety for him lived in solitude. His grief didn't just change him, it consumed him. And by the time illness took hold, Johnny had already disappeared from the world in every way except physically. What remained were quiet days, fewer than 20 visitors a year, and a man who once made millions laugh suddenly living in near total silence. Some say this isolation was his coping mechanism. Others say it was punishment, self-inflicted. But in truth, it was probably both. Loss didn't just close a chapter in his life, it locked the book. By the time Johnny Carson stepped away from The Tonight Show in 1992, America expected him to live like royalty. Guest appearances, memoirs, interviews, endless tributes. Instead, he vanished with quiet precision, slipping into a life so private it bordered on myth. For the next 13 years, until his death, Johnny lived a life that looked nothing like fame. No red carpets, no press tours, no public speeches, just silence. His Malibu home became his fortress, a place where the outside world simply stopped. Even friends who had known him for decades rarely saw him. Reports say that in a typical year, only about 20 people made it past his front door. Not because he was angry or bitter, but because solitude felt safer than attention. Even the people he did let in were treated differently than your typical guest. They didn't come for parties or long conversations. They came to sit quietly, to watch the ocean, to look at the stars. Director Howard Smith, one of the only people who visited regularly, once said their moments together often passed in near complete silence. Johnny would hand him a drink, walk outside with him, and simply look up. No long speeches, no forced small talk, just two men staring into the night sky. And strangely, it felt peaceful, almost sacred. Daily life in isolation. Johnny's days became simple, predictable, intentional. He'd wake up in the quiet of the ocean air and spend his mornings reading. He loved astronomy. Not the dramatic, romanticized version, but the science of it. The math, the theories, the vastness. The stars gave him perspective, maybe even comfort. They made everything, fame, pain, loss, feel small. When he wasn't reading, he played tennis alone. Not for sport or competition, just for the motion, the rhythm, the quiet. He'd exchange brief phone calls with Jay Leno, trading jokes like two craftsmen swapping tools. But even those conversations were short, controlled, never emotional. When the laughter ended, Johnny hung up and returned to the silence. In the evenings, he ate dinner at home with his fourth wife, Alexis Mass. No guests, no parties. Quiet meals. Soft conversations. A world reduced to 2 chairs at a table. To outsiders, it might have seemed lonely. But to Johnny, it was peace. Private generosity. Despite keeping the world at arm's length, Johnny never stopped caring about people. He simply didn't show it publicly. He quietly donated millions of dollars to strangers, individuals struggling with bills, illnesses, education. He signed checks anonymously, never asking for recognition or thanks. He helped from the shadows, the same place he lived in. It was the most revealing contradiction about him. He struggled with emotional closeness, but he had a deep instinct for generosity. He avoided parties, but sent life-changing amounts of money to people he'd never meet. It wasn't attention he wanted, just impact. Was he truly content? Those who visited swear he seemed calm, peaceful, almost fulfilled. But others questioned whether that serenity was real or a quiet mask covering old wounds. Was Johnny protecting his peace or hiding from the world that once hurt him? It's hard to know. Even his closest friends couldn't fully answer. Some said he finally found the quiet he spent his whole life chasing. Others believed the silence was a cage, one he built himself, brick by brick. Maybe it was both. A private end on January 23, 2005, Johnny Carson passed away at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Respiratory failure from emphysema, the final result of decades of smoking. With him went not only a legend, but an entire era of late-night television. There was no public funeral, no televised tribute orchestrated by his family, no massive Hollywood gathering. His ashes were quietly scattered, location undisclosed. No spotlight, no audience, just the ocean, the wind, and silence. After a lifetime of applause, Johnny left the world the same way he lived his last years, privately. Legacy Johnny Carson's story isn't just about fame, it's about the price of it. It's about a man who could make millions laugh, yet struggled to let even a handful of people truly know him. It's about the difference between being loved by everyone and being known by no one. His final years weren't glamorous, they weren't dramatic, they were quiet, simple, intentional. He spent his last chapter not as the king of late night, but as a man searching for peace, and finally finding it in the quiet places where applause could no longer reach him. Because in the end, Johnny Carson didn't disappear because he stopped caring about the world. He disappeared because the world, with all its noise and expectations, never felt safe enough to stay in. Johnny Carson's life reads like a paradox. A man who spent 30 years talking to millions, yet struggled to speak to the people closest to him. On stage, he was warm, witty, and effortlessly charming. Off stage, he slipped into silence, into the comfort of solitude, where no one could judge him, pressure him, or take more than he could give. From the outside, his disappearance looked mysterious. Some thought he was guarding his legacy. Others assumed he was simply tired of fame. But the truth runs deeper. His childhood taught him that love could be conditional. His marriages proved he didn't know how to let people in. His addiction showed the weight he carried alone. And the loss of 2 sons shattered whatever pieces were left. Every part of his story pulled him further from the world, until isolation wasn't an escape, but a destination. Yet within that solitude, Johnny built a quiet life. He found routine, stillness, and perhaps the peace he'd always been denied. He read, he learned, he watched the stars. He gave millions of dollars anonymously, changing lives he'd never meet. And for those few who sat beside him in silence, he offered a rare glimpse of the man behind the myth. Not the king of late night, but simply Johnny. He didn't need crowds anymore. He didn't need applause. He only needed quiet. In the end, his story reminds us that fame isn't connection. Attention isn't love. And applause can't heal the wounds we carry from childhood. Millions adored him. Yet he spent his final years seeing fewer than 20 people. Not because he was forgotten, but because he chose it. Some see tragedy in that. Others see peace. Maybe it's both. Johnny Carson lived his life on his own terms. He left the stage while he was still loved. He controlled his image, protected his privacy, and slipped into the shadows before the lights could fade for him. And maybe that's the ultimate legacy, to walk away before the world gets to decide your ending. Because even though Johnny Carson disappeared from the spotlight, the impact of his presence and his absence still echoes. Long after the applause, long after the cameras stopped rolling, Johnny remains a reminder that the people who make us laugh the hardest are often the ones fighting the quietest battles. And sometimes, the greatest act isn't performing, it's walking away. If Johnny Carson's story surprised you, and you want to uncover more hidden truths behind Hollywood's most mysterious legends, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tell us in the comments, do you think Johnny found peace in the end, or was he running from something he could never escape? Your thoughts help us shape the stories we tell next, and if you're ready for another unbelievable Hollywood deep dive, watch the next video on your screen. You won't believe what we found.